Well, we are just going to take it away here. All right. I am joined by Chris Gunlock. Chris Gunlock is someone I'm very excited to talk about. And please forgive the noise if there's background noise. I'm going to be doing my best to mute myself. But here we go. Christopher Gunlock is the founder of Open Mind Integration, a service that trains you and coaches the integration of the psychedelic experience. He is based in Minneapolis. He has a master's in health and sciences and integrative medicine and is a member of the board of the Psychedelic Society of Minnesota. Open Mind Integration not only teaches how to integrate psychedelics, but they also offer other services like health checks and one-on-one coaching. He is on Instagram at Open Mind Gunlock and Twitter at Open Mind HC, and I will include those links in the description. Chris, good morning. How are you, and how did I do with that little intro? Did I miss anything? Did I botch it?
That's wonderful, John. Yeah. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you taking the time to inquire about what it is I do. I'm always, very honored to talk about this topic. It's something I care very deeply about.
Absolutely. I mean, when I found you on Twitter, I did a little bit of deep diving, and like I mentioned yesterday, the type of service you provide is something that's been missing in this space for quite some time. Just anything that contributes to making any sense of the psychedelic experience is I think it's great. I think what you're doing is great. So I just got a few questions for you. We've already looked over them, but I will just start with one that I usually have for most of my guests. How did you originally get into psychedelics/mushrooms?
Yeah, well, it was mushrooms that was my first experience. I was 17. I had a friend, just thought that I would get something out of it. My friend was pretty experienced, and so had a good setting to start me off, and it was easily one of the most interesting experience I ever had. I could talk for an hour just about that one experience, but needless to say, it began a long fascination, passion for exploring these parts of the mind that, at the time nobody really told me about, right? Like I was astounded at the depth and intrigue within our own minds that seemed to be off limits, so to speak. And so maybe, part of my rebellious nature might have led me there, but also just frankly, this, especially now in retrospect, is I feel quite validated, but these are parts of our mind that are very important. So I mean, one thing led to another. I just, kept exploring psychedelics, and meditation became a big part of my life as well. I really put those two in the same bag. They function very differently, but I think they're doing very similar things. So, that was how it started.
Okay, cool. And you just mentioned meditation. And do you think those go like together, or I think you mentioned something how you can reach certain open mind states with there's multiple ways to get there, of course, but I hope you don't mind me going off script, but do you meditate before your experiences, or do you encourage that? Do they go together, or would you separate them? What would you say?
I think you could do any of those things for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've tried meditating on psychedelics, and there's definitely something there. I mean, in general, meditation for me is what sort of happens in between your trips. I find that the integration component is very difficult if you're always just coming back to your normal, default states, where the world around you is familiar and material. And so it helps a lot to be able to go back to, some transcendent state where you're going beyond your normal limited thinking, your normal kind of bounded states of mind, where the divisions between you and everything else are kind of at the focus of your awareness. So meditation does a great job at that. Depending on how deep you go or what practice you do, you get different levels of that kind of psychedelic open mind experience. But I think it just matters that you're doing it regularly. It just sort of gives you a little bit of reminder that it's there, helps to incorporate some of the insights that you maybe would have gotten with a psychedelic journey. It's also just plain good for your health too. There's studies showing that lowers your blood pressure, lowers inflammation, lowers stress. So even if you're just doing it for those reasons, you're going to be getting, more benefits, especially if you're combining with some psychedelic experiences as well.
Very cool, very cool. I just wanted to ask you that. And you just used the phrase open mind state, and that was my next question. How did you come up with that term, open mind state?
So there's, I think, a lot of ways to say it. I've used other terms like expanded consciousness, transcendental consciousness. I've heard, ego dissolution. I think they're all kind of getting at the same thing. Open mind state. It just felt like kind of an easier, like, mainstream way to put it. I do my best to try to explain these kind of abstract, arcane concepts to as many people as I can. So I try to use language that doesn't alienate people and can sort of like fit into normal ways of speaking. And so open mind state is, yeah, it's essentially just any of the, it's a broad term, just sort of encompassing psychedelic states, meditative states, even trance, the various forms of induction devices that some ancient traditions use, via like breath work or ceremonial ritual. Basically anything that takes you out of your very focused, limited ego state. I would consider that an open mind state.
Yeah, love it, love it. Yeah, I think it's an easy phrase to understand at face value, and you're trying to reach, the masses. So I think it's great. Okay, next question. What is the role of nutrition when it comes to open mind integration? Because I know you're in the integrative, master's in health
Integrated
sciences
medicine.
and integrative medicine. Yes, there you go. So yeah, can you? I'm actually just coming from being around health food people, and that I was just at a small mom and pop health food store. But I mean, I learned a crap ton about nutrition, and they are complete um, believers in that, I guess, because unfortunately, there's a lot of weird, like, pseudoscience, and some people take a lot of the natural health and holistics as kind of belief and faith, and they try to stay away from Western medicine as much as possible because they believe that proper nutrition, the body can heal itself, and which I totally believe. I totally believe that. There's just you just gotta make sure you're not going down some as one person call it, hooey. There's a lot of hooey in that space. So yeah, so can you tell me a bit about the role of nutrition in open mind integration?
Sure. So nutrition, I think, that has a role in all the states of consciousness. I often talk about a 4-quadrant model of your states of consciousness being like waking, dreaming, unconscious, and then the open mind states or expanded consciousness. And generally, I mean, I started getting into nutrition just as a general, like, health consulting device. But I think it definitely applies to the integrative aspect of the open mind state, because the quality of your physiology, it, it is a big factor in a person's ability to operate on different, like, levels of their mind, to be able to go from one state to another. Meditation, for example, um, I think a lot of people who meditate find that they can more easily go to those deeper states when their body is in a healthy state. Because if you're distracted by, chronic pain or discomfort or inflammation, even, the body is not really prioritizing, shifting your states of consciousness. So in general, you're going to have a lot easier time going to these different states of consciousness if your body is all kind of in harmony. And I would definitely put that, I mean, psychedelics doesn't necessarily require you to have like a healthy body, they're drugs, right? And so putting it in your body is basically all you need. However, what you do get out of it definitely depends on how healthy your body is, and that whole integration phase after your experience. What are we really using the psychedelics for? Usually mental health or even physical health, basically to become a better version of yourself. And so if you are coming at it from a holistic perspective, which you definitely should, your food is a huge part of what determines your physiology's health. It's one of the most common habits we all share, and so a large part of our physiological makeup will be determined by the food we eat, how we eat it, when we eat it, all of that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. I just want to rip on that for a second. I've noticed when I take psychedelics, mostly mushrooms, I think LSD. I think when I get into that open mind state, under the influence of psychedelics, I can't even fathom eating any kind of meat. I don't know if you get that. I just don't know. I think I've read other people experiencing something similar, but I just cannot stomach meat. All I want is like fruit and just easy things like granola or maybe yogurt, even though that's kind of dairy. I don't know, but I've taken the hints from that, and I now think, okay, in order to prep for the psychedelic experience, I want to be eating vegetables. I want to be eating natural foods like that aren't heavy, that are pleasing to your gut and your body. Do you get that? Do you report any like distaste for meat when you're under the influence?
I can relate to that big time. Yeah, and I definitely know a lot of people who speak to the same qualities of those very dense foods, particularly animal products. And I would say though that different foods have different purposes. I think that meat has a very valuable purpose, but for these open mind states of consciousness, it's maybe not the best fit. Um, there's probably a lot of ways to reason that. One of, I would say maybe just like a very practical reason behind that might be that your dense foods like meat in particular require a lot more bodily energy to digest. It's literally having to break down very very tough bounds of the molecular components of food, the proteins. So it's a lot more of like a strain on the body when in these open mind states, it's less about your body and it's more about your mind. So it makes sense to get nourishment that doesn't tax the body so much and focuses more of what's happening on the denser parts of you. Because it's ultimately we're talking about density, right? Meat is the most dense form of food, and the mind is the least dense part of our body. I mean, essentially, the mind is basically non-physical. It's immaterial. It's consciousness, and so food that is more likely to support diverting energy towards that is going to be lighter, less dense food like fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. So I think make perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely.
That is very interesting. Moving on here. Does open mind integration only offer psilocybin related integration?
Oh no, I mean, I focus on what I'm experienced with most. Psilocybin mushrooms are definitely my number one. LSD is a close second though. I mean, I would say like probably a quarter of my trips over my lifetime with LSD, and then most of the others with mushrooms. I've tripped a few hundred times on those substances, and I think that they're for at least our culture, and I think that's a big part of your choice of substance is culture and setting. I think those are great. You know, I think you're going to get what you need for the most part. Although I'm pretty well versed in a few others, although not personal. I don't have personal experience in things like Ibogaine, San Pedro, ayahuasca. Um, I'll probably try those someday. It's not like an immediate priority for me, just because for my personal purposes, my growth purposes, um, it doesn't seem as yeah, just a high priority. Although I could be missing something there. Like there's definitely a whole world in each of those substances. But as one of the organizers of the Psychedelic Society of Minnesota, I do get the pleasure of speaking with a lot of people who are very well versed in these substances, very well experienced, even people who offer therapies with these substances. And so I have a great deal of respect for what's going on with those, and the maybe some of the more niche purposes, like opiate addiction, for example, and Ibogaine are, you know, they're very well known to go very well together. And I personally know some people who have overcome amazing challenges with drug addiction because of Ibogaine. And similar, ayahuasca, you know, has I mean, that's a whole world in itself. But it's, you know, it's very rooted in specific cultures, and so I think it has its own purposes that may not always apply to most of the people that I work with. So I generally talk to people about mushrooms and LSD, occasionally DMT. DMT is also one that I have a fair amount of experience in, and I think there's some application to it, although I would put it in the more like risky bag of psychedelics, particularly the smoked and vaped forms of DMT, because they they can definitely change your concept of reality in a radical way, and in a blink of an eye even. So that's definitely been one that some people have come to me with some issues with, and so it definitely comes up. It comes up for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. DMT is risky. I haven't heard that before, but you know, I can totally see it. I've tried DMT smoked
Mm,
through a chalet, but I didn't really break through. It's like I got to some border where people report seeing like a lattice type shape, something that you would eventually go through, but I wasn't able to really truly break through. But I've also heard from others that DMT, whereas mushrooms hold the experience in your minds and inside, DMT and ayahuasca kind of take it out and put it in front of you.
mm, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's just one way I've heard about it. I can't verify because I haven't really been there yet. But you mentioned Ibogaine as well, and that was going to be one of my questions. What do you think about Ibogaine compared to the other tryptamine psychedelics like psilocybin, DMT, or LSD, peyote? Um,
Sure.
Ibogaine has always intrigued me. I just don't know where to get it, who to talk to. There's not a whole lot of information out there, but it sounds amazing. And I actually, a little anecdote here. The guy who came up with the 12 steps, the 12-step program, apparently he had actually taken Ibogaine in a clinical setting and defeated his alcoholism. And under that, he reported a very uncomfortable but intense spiritual experience. And that played a role in his developing the 12 steps, which is centered around having a higher power of some sort that you follow or adhere to. So I thought that fascinating. I had no idea till recently that Ibogaine played a role in developing the 12 steps. But fun fact there. But I do
Yeah.
want to ask you what you think about it, and maybe you can point me to somebody after this who knows more about it, or maybe I can bring on the podcast, because Ibogaine has always fascinated me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've heard similar stories about the 12-step program. Psychedelics do seem to have played a role in its creation, which is kind of an interesting irony there. But Yeah, Ibogaine, I have a great deal of respect for. I have some friends that are very deeply involved in that. Um, it's absolutely a fascinating substance. Like I said, I have yet to try it myself. I definitely plan to at some point in my life, but um, some people even put it in a different class outside of the world of psychedelics because it's so different. It's psychedelic in the sense that it definitely expands your consciousness into other realms, but the way it does it, people, they, I've heard the term onira, what is it called? Onirodelic or something like that. Uh, it comes from the root word comes from dreams. Onironauts are like people who explored the dream world, and that's what I hear is the experience is less like a psychedelic, trippy colors and shapes and like beings and aliens and stuff, but more just like a dream. It's like sort of it transports you to another version of this reality. So oftentimes it is just kind of matter of fact, like you're in a place at a certain time with certain people. Sometimes it can be a little bit more abstract, but nonetheless, the experience is so visceral and real that people come back with drastically different opinions about themselves, different beliefs, different inspirations. It seems to provide a profound reset of the brain that not all psychedelics can do as effectively. And there's also some pharmacology studies that have found some physical evidence that it does seem to do something to the opiate receptors in your brain, thus legitimizing the powerful anti-addictive properties of it. I have a podcast myself that I don't really run anymore, but I had a great interview with my friend Brock. He's been a long time Ibogaine journeyer. He basically goes to Costa Rica like every year, has his re-up of Iboga, and it saved his life essentially. I mean, he was about to die because of his substance addictions, and now he's just thriving. I mean, and he couldn't love more to talk about that stuff. I mean, it really saved his life. But even beyond that, I mean, he talks about the Ibogaine shamans having incredible abilities. Really just kind of superhero stuff that it'd be very hard to believe. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to plug some people at some point. I know a few people in the treatment center integration kind of circles of Ibogaine, and I think they're doing great work. I have no doubt that we'll be seeing more about Ibogaine in the news, and hopefully, unless the pharmaceutical companies have anything to do with it. But it's definitely out there. It's definitely out there.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, definitely plug me up with some people later. Definitely start your podcast back up because everybody listens to podcasts nowadays.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. What else do I got? Oh yeah, quick question: is Ibogaine actually in the same family as the tryptamine-based psychedelics?
I don't believe it's a tryptamine. I wouldn't be able to say anything more on that though. Yeah, I think the tryptamines are limited to DMT and psilocybin.
And LSD.
LSD is a phenethylamine.
And that's what I got you.
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah.
All right, thanks for clearing that up for me. Let's see. Have you tried the Amanita muscaria mushroom? And what do you think about that experience if you have?
I have tried it. I tried a smokable extract and I tried the dried whole mushroom. Um, the extract was interesting. It definitely alters your consciousness pretty significantly. It was a long time ago. I kind of remember it being, it was like kind of a muddy dream-like state. It was very, it was hard to sort of discern what was happening. Um,
Muddy, dreamlike. Yeah,
yeah,
I can see
yeah,
that.
muddy,
Yep.
very muddy. Yeah. Um, and I don't know. I would try it again. Certainly, it just compared to psilocybin and LSD, it didn't grab me, as much. And also I've read that the traditional use of Amanita muscaria is a little bit more involved. Apparently, to get the full effects of it, to get the most potent form of it, what they would do in I don't know, the native tribes of wherever they used it was the shaman would eat the mushroom, urinate into a, a cup or whatever, and have someone else drink that, and that would be a more potent form of it. But then they would even do subsequent urinations and drinking of the substance, and apparently the more times it filters through a person's body, the more potent it gets. So that's definitely you got to be pretty committed to be into that one. Yeah.
Committed is a word for it. Yeah. Apparently, the ancient shamans of Siberia were the ones doing this, and the ibotenic acid turns into the muscimol turns into ibotenic acid through heat, and I guess by going through the body, and then they urinate it out, and it becomes more pure and pure with less of the uncomfortable toxin, the ibotenic acid. Or maybe vice versa. Yeah, one of those toxins turn into the other, what is called a deliriant. I think it's the ibotenic acid, muscimol, ibotenic acid. One of those chemicals makes you feel really shitty. It makes you salivate, blurry vision. But the more pure that substance turns into the ibotenic acid, the more it becomes like a spiritual, dreamlike state. And I have also read that part of the experience is actually going to sleep. Is actually taking it, having some ecstatic experience, going to sleep because it kind of puts you into a stupor, and then waking up and you're still kind of in a dreamlike state. Yeah, very, very weird, fascinating stuff. And yeah, you do have to be committed. That's one way to put it. To get the
well,
full
if there was like a synthetic form of that, I would love to try. I mean, it sounds amazing. If someone could make that in a lab instead of having to drink someone's pee, I would definitely be into that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm not really a chemist. Would that be difficult? Would it be? Is it too unstable? Or I feel like someone should have done it by now. Synthesize it somehow.
I would think so. Yeah, I have no idea. I definitely don't have the expertise to say, but I mean, it sounds like something worth looking into. Whoever out there knows about this stuff, please.
If you're a chemist watching this, please try it out. Try it out. All right, Chris, we're nearing the end here. Just a couple more questions. How often do you take psychedelics, and what do you recommend for the average person?
Oh, well, myself, it's varied over the years. It's been about 15 years since my first experience. I mean, there was a period of a few years I think I tripped maybe like every week, but sometimes I'll go a year without taking any psychedelics at all, and sometimes it'll be like maybe once a month or once every few months. I would say that as time has gone on, I take less psychedelics for sure. I, I don't necessarily regret how much I've taken in the past, but I probably didn't need to take as much as I did, and I'd say that there definitely is some detrimental effects to taking more than you need. It's maybe not what people would expect, but because I mean I haven't necessarily noticed any like cognitive deficits or physical side effects. It's not that. I think the main detriment for taking too much psychedelics is the stigma and the inability to kind of fit in socially. I honestly I find that is the worst part of taking the hardest part of taking psychedelics is feeling like you don't you just you don't understand, or people don't understand you. Your mind is sort of in a different place, and you kind of feel left out of the mainstream. Things have changed a lot, certainly. Like there are large communities now where you can definitely be a part of a group of people that totally get what you're saying. But I mean, even then, even within psychedelic communities, and I'm a part of one, there are people who really like take it even further. And I mean, that's the thing about psychedelics is there's really no end to it. You can go as far as you want to. It's just a matter of dosage. And when you push those higher doses and do it on a more regular basis, you're really challenging your ability to kind of fit in your skin, to be a physical being, to be a human being, to be someone with an ego. Because the ego is not a bad thing. You need an ego to function as a human being. And if you're constantly destroying your ego, eventually it's going to be really hard to function as a normal person. And um, that's why my focus is so much on integration right now. Like there was maybe a time in my life where I was like, hey, let's see how far we can push it, you know? Like, I mean, that is the tendency when a lot of people first discover psychedelics. It's like, whoa, there's a whole part of my brain I didn't know I had. Let's see what that's about. And so I totally get that. But I do caution people that eventually you do have to come back to earth, so to speak. You know, you have to be able to sustain yourself financially and physically and take care of your friends and your family. And so over the years, I, I started feeling like I needed to shift my priorities. And so I opened up to my family about psychedelics. I started being more honest to my friends about it. And I feel like I've really accomplished more during that time than I maybe even did in the first, like, 5 years or so I was experimenting with psychedelics. Because um, being able to just like talk to my mom, for example, about my acid trip last weekend, uh, that that has been profoundly rewarding. Honestly, I can't say how much I've appreciated being able to do that. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. But again, I recognize people are at different spots in their journey with psychedelics. There's a lot of good reasons to use them, and I don't want to limit, or I don't want to try to say, who should use psychedelics for what purpose. Um, but yeah, nowadays, I still trip. Like I tripped just last weekend actually, and it was profound. It was wonderful. I guess maybe I'm down to a few times a year, something like that. It varies. I Nowadays I'm much more picky, I guess I would say, about where I do it, who I do it with, how much I do, because I appreciate a lot more now that you can craft your experience in really profound ways if you really go about it intentionally, and um, if you create a set and setting that has very specific parameters, you can transform your psychedelic experience to amazing degrees and get way more out of it than you maybe normally would if you were just kind of going to a rave and taking some mushrooms or something like that. So yeah, I'm just more selective nowadays. I definitely love taking psychedelics just as much as I always did, but I suppose after you've tried tripping on a roller coaster and like getting on a city bus when you're on acid, like that's sort of less of a priority now for me. And I guess I'm just more about how much can I, how, how, how far can I like take my mind's capabilities, and how much can I really integrate, and how successful can I make my life as a whole, rather than just see how far I can take my mind. Because that's the thing, is like psychedelics are easy. Anybody can put psychedelics in their body. Again, it's just a matter of dose. You can become God, you can become infinite and omniscient. That's easy. What's difficult is making it count in your real life, is making it work in ways that, because the physical world is still the ultimate world. Like, as much as I appreciate all the things you can do outside your body and all these different realms of consciousness, the ultimate challenge is still your physical body, your physical world, planet Earth. Um, because once you're dead, that's gone. You whatever you believe of what happens after death, you get to do that for however long you want, but the time that you're in your body is finite. And so I think it's good to remember that you should appreciate what the time that you have here right now, rather than spend your whole life in these far away psychedelic realms. And not that they're not useful, because I think integrating those realms together is really the key. But eventually, you got to come back to your body eventually. So yeah, I guess that's where I'm at nowadays.
Awesome. Yeah. Taking acid on and getting on a city bus. It's not. You're not going to achieve. I mean, you could achieve ego death that way, but it's for me that would just be anxiety inducing. Just thinking about all the people around me going to and from work, and then my mind will start to go drop down. Like what is even what is this rat race we're in, and just keep going down further and further.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the actual integration process, since that's what you're all about, I can't believe I didn't even write this down in my questions, but if you can give me a brief overview of what does integration look like what does open mind integration do?
Sure. So I do work with people in the preparatory process as well. So that's before you actually take the psychedelics. I mean that part of it is, a lot of it is just like feeding people information, just educational, just making sure people know what they need to know. But integration does kind of start before your experience as well. And so what that generally looks like is identifying what are your goals, what do you hope to change, why are you really doing this, and if those goals are practical, because if you're looking to take psychedelics to, let's say, get rich overnight, for example, that could be feasible, if you have some sort of opportunities kind of on the horizon, or some, real world chance to do that. But, you're not going to materialize money out of nowhere just because you took a high dose of whatever. So making your goals like fit well with where you're at in your life is a key part of integration. Um, and and then also looking at what sorts of risks you might be running. Some people have some predispositions to um, having a hard time staying in control of themselves when they're in those states of mind. And then also just the practicalities of their setting. Not everyone has the right setting available to them. Like if someone is let's say in an abusive relationship, and fully dependent on living with the person that is causing them all their troubles, then they should not be taking psychedelics in that same environment. It's just not the right time for them. So sometimes, unfortunately, I have to tell people, like, look, either you need to like find a different situation for yourself before you get on this journey, or you just need to wait, waiting for the right opening. And that's really tough, because a lot of people are coming to psychedelics because they see it as this quick fix. They're like, whoa, this thing could like change your mind like in one experience. And I read the Michael Pollan book, and I'm ready to like become a new person and all that. But there's so much that has to come into play in order to really come out of that experience well. Because unfortunately, the experiences you hear about most often are just the ones that worked out well. What you don't usually hear about are the times where people took psychedelics and either nothing happened or they were worse after. And I can speak from my own experience that sometimes I had a great trip, but then I felt worse later. And there's this fall from grace that can, if you have an amazing experience, but then you come back to a world that sucks, like that is limiting, where you feel like you're trapped and you can't do anything. You've got these memories of a version of yourself that's wonderful, but in a body and in a situation where you can't do anything about it. And that can make you even more depressed and feel awful, and just kind of you end up taking steps backwards. And so I'm very cautious about letting people know that this there's a lot that needs to go into it. But then after the experience, assuming they had a good experience that brought a lot of insights and potentially overcame some challenges, that's where piecing together new parts of your identity comes into play, because ultimately that is really the goal of psychedelics, is to change your sense of identity, to either add some things to your ego or take some things away. And that requires some major discipline, frankly. You you've got to have the willpower to actually become a different person, because the ego is extremely protective. The ego does not like to change. The function of the ego is to keep your sense of identity secure and consistent. And that's a good thing, because that is what you frankly need to function, is you need to have some consistency in who you are. Otherwise, you're just kind of all over the place. And I mean, sure, you've met those people at music festivals. They're just kind of this weird like entity that don't really have an identity, and that just frankly doesn't work in general society. So you don't want that extreme, but then again, you also don't want the opposite extreme of not changing at all. Having a crazy experience, but then coming right back to who you were before, and then just going on your way with the same old problems. So that basically just comes down to getting a lot of support. I encourage people to bring in as many of their close friends and family into that process as possible. Explain to people what happened, talk about your experience, say what you want to change, what parts of you want to add on or take away, what habits you want to change, what belief systems maybe. The more fundamental you can go, the better, honestly. But it's on every level. I mean, back to nutrition, for example, it can be as simple as that. Like, you can take psychedelics with the intention of like eating less junk food, frankly, but eating junk food is a part of people's identity. It's really weird how that works, but like, people, if you get into a comfortable habit of like knowing like, this donut is going to make me feel secure and whole in this moment. And you have to be willing to let that go in replacement of some new trajectory. So the integration process really takes a close look at that in helping people get comfortable with a new version of themselves, which again is easier said than done, but ultimately extremely rewarding. I mean, that's really, I think, what people are craving nowadays. They find themselves stuck in a life that they really don't like, and it's not taking them where they want to go. So that's why I think psychedelics are getting so popular these days, because they really are serving a purpose that it's hard to find in other places.
Gotcha. Yeah, lots of good stuff there, big stuff. So it's getting to, I don't know, I feel like we've been at it for about an hour. We didn't go through all the questions, but maybe we can finish up with one or two more.
Sure. Yeah, I got some time. You can throw some more questions at me if you got them.
Yeah, just one or two. Let's do this one. So Oregon, where I just moved to, is about to. They're going to have on the ballot for November IP34, which will allow the manufacture, delivery, and administration of psilocybin at supervised and licensed facilities. When do you think this kind of petition will reach places where you work, like Minnesota?
Yeah, hopefully soon. I've been fortunate to be involved with our decriminalization campaign in Minneapolis.
Awesome.
Before quarantine hit, we were on track with the Minneapolis City Council to um, uh, most likely pass a decriminalization measure for psychedelic plants and mushrooms, which basically, I mean, it wouldn't have been a full decriminalization, because the police are technically loyal to state laws rather than just city laws. However, it would have at least set a precedent and been a first step towards moving towards a major decriminalization measure that would allow for a lot more freedom in people taking psychedelics and growing mushrooms, for example. unfortunately, yeah, quarantine hit, and you know, the COVID stuff took priority in City Hall, so that took a back seat. However, the George Floyd incident then further changed things, kind of in a different way, though. So um, once the defund police movement, you know, got a lot of traction, the the possibility of decriminalizing drugs became, um, I mean, in some ways, like psychedelics took a back seat, but in other ways, drugs in general, illicit drugs, all of a sudden came to the front of the conversation because, you know, as I think most people all know, a huge part of what police do is criminalize drug users, and this you know costs an amazing amount of money to do. And so the idea behind defunding the police, or at least some of the idea, is to divert some of what uh, the resources are needed to criminalize drug users and prosecute drug users, which again is a huge amount of money, and spend that instead on healthcare, or you know, psychological, mental health care. Um, and so there's nothing like moving through at the moment, but the people that I work with in Psychedelic Society, they are you know, planning to move in that direction of decriminalizing drugs in general. Um, we're hoping to, you know, team up with some of the other local activist organizations on that eventually, but um, you know, we're sort of having to wait and see what happens with Minneapolis City Council at the moment right now, because you know, they're tackling the police department as a whole right now, and you know, whether or not you agree with that, that's going to or it could fundamentally change the structure of our policing system locally. And so um, I think that on a local level, decriminalization is pretty likely. On a state level, medicalization is, you know, psilocybin is not too far off. I mean, even on a federal level. And so on a state level, it would, you know, be quite likely, I would say, in the next 5-10 years easily. Um, LSD, I think, is probably a little further off unless some, you know, major shift happens. MDMA, you know, as a lot of people have heard, is really got a lot of traction there in their phase 3 clinical trials, which means the FDA is probably going to approve that as medicine soon, which will open up some doors to decriminalization and state level legalization. But yeah, I mean, Oregon's really kind of leading the way as far as the United States goes. I know they also have some decriminalization measures in Portland that you know, could make some headway. I've been in contact with the Portland Psychedelic Society people quite a bit, and some of the decriminalization movement folks over there. And yeah, I mean, they're working hard on it, and you know, likewise here, we're really working hard, and there's things are changing so quickly that honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we'd be looking at a very different world of psychedelics in just the next 5 to 10 years easily.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting how all these recent events, like you guys are making progress in that space of decriminalization, and then the world, or at least the country, probably the world though, just rethinking authority figures in general, and rethinking the police departments in general, and law enforcement in general. It sounds like it took a back place during the quarantine. Then George Floyd happened. Then the discussion of defund the police. Yeah, in a really roundabout way, it's caused us. I love it. I love rethinking the police and rethinking law enforcement. Like I'm totally for it. I do have to hear both sides of the story though. I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan's guest on. He has a couple of times called Jocko Willink. He's like a Navy military guy, but he believes we need to fund the police more. That's his opinion. But with way more training. Apparently, cops only get like a few hours a year of like high intensity situational training. but that's exactly what they need more and more of. So that they don't.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of issues, I think, with the way cops are trained. That it's they're trained more like warriors and insurgents rather than people who are supposed to protect and serve, which is ironic because that's exactly what it says on their squad cars. I think even in Minneapolis it says something like to protect and serve with compassion or something like that, which just
It's
that's
something so phony. It's
yeah.
my whole life I have just read those whatever protect and serve like on all those cop cars. It's always been so phony to me because we
Yeah.
all know because as a cannabis user discovering cannabis, discovering mushrooms, and the fact that we've been lied to about drugs for the most part, just yeah, I got a little bit of bias towards police, I guess. But I mean that comes with growing up around complete assholes, people who work there, complete jerks who have not tried drugs, have not tried cannabis or psilocybin, yet they're going to be arresting you and putting you in cages for it. And I think part of their training, if they're going to get tased, if they're going to be tasing others, and they have to go through and get tased themselves as part of their training, they need to be taking heroin also before they start locking up people for taking heroin. I'm serious. That's how I honestly feel about it. And so they know what real physical addiction feels like, so that they know that these people are suffering and need medical attention and not to be locked up. I'm really passionate about that. So
Yeah, I think there's some good reason in there. Yeah.
yeah, and this whole rethinking, yeah, you might as well just wait and just go with the flow for rethinking what police are going to be doing, or like how we're going to distribute resources to these police departments differently.
Yeah, that's kind of the thought right now. I mean, City Hall is really busy in general, so coming from a psychedelic standpoint just doesn't seem as relevant anymore. Because frankly, yeah, like you're saying, the problem is all drugs. It's not just psychedelics. All drugs need to be decriminalized because it's just the war on drugs is just insane. It's stupid. It's not helping anyone except for putting money in the pockets of people who are enforcing these laws. So yeah, that's hopefully the direction where things are going. Have to wait and see. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. So we'll see what happens.
We can just kind of take a back seat and get some popcorn and just watch for a second. Yep. But all right, man. I think I'm gonna let you go for now. Let's do an ending question though. What's your favorite book? Do you have a book recommendation?
I'm not a huge book guy. I feel bad when folks are recommending me books and stuff because I dig into the internet. Like that's I guess
Same
I have
here.
the ADD brain of like trying to draw from as many resources at the same time as I can. I guess I mean,
or even just the good reading you can suggest.
Sure. Let me think. There's a lot of good like mushroom books out there. One that I found recently, a friend gave me. It's called Radical Mycology.
Nice, Peter McCoy's book. Nice.
Okay, so yeah. I mean, anyone who's into mushrooms have probably heard about it. I mean, it's just, I think what we really need right now is more like radical thinking around mushrooms. Frankly, mushrooms hold so many amazing secrets that it just blows me away that humans or modern humans have not really taken advantage of it because mushrooms play such a critical role in our entire ecosystem and as we talked about in the mind as well. They say mushrooms handle the decomposition phase of matter, where they can basically transform waste into something incredibly beneficial. And I think psilocybin is a great example of that, but just in the mind. Like if you've tripped before on mushrooms, you may have experienced something like the mushrooms sort of bringing your shameful thoughts, your guilty thoughts, the things that maybe you don't want to face, brings them up to the front and then asks you to let them go. And that's just like exactly what mushrooms do. They take all the stuff you don't need they transform it into something good. You come out the other end of that feeling like $1,000,000. And so imagine if we could have that same process on every level of our planet. You know, if you know we got a planet full of garbage. You know, we got a planet full of crap, and if we can get mushrooms into the right places, we may be able to just clean this whole thing up and have a much better world ahead of us. And yeah, radical mycology has got a lot of really good ideas in there that I think that could be really helpful for anyone who's getting into mushrooms. It's not like a super difficult read either. I think it's written in a way that is very digestible for most people, but it's also extremely dense. It's got a lot of good knowledge and a lot of good practical stuff too. You know, all the how-tos of how to grow, how to cultivate and all that stuff. So there's a book. I haven't read the whole thing, but I know it's a good one. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I know it's a good one, even though I haven't read it yet. I did give it away on a copy on social media a couple of years ago, but I should probably read it for myself because apparently new mushroomers and old mushroomers can get something out of it. I keep hearing. So, but yeah, that analogy that you mentioned about how mushrooms, they take the waste, they take the inert substrate, and they turn it into something super beneficial. And I always actually use that analogy that psilocybin mushrooms do the same exact thing to your mind. They take whatever is rotting, whatever bad negativity thoughts that you're holding on to, and they make you look at it and look at yourself and be like, is that something you want to continue to be? And then it's up to you to make the decision. I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yep.
Chris, this was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm sure we'll be in touch. I'm following you on Twitter now. Yeah, man. Any ending thoughts or ending words, comments?
Oh, I appreciate the conversation, John. Yeah, this is a really important thing to get out there, and so I think you'll find a lot of folks wanting to get more out of this. So I appreciate being on your podcast here, and I wish you the best of luck. And let's keep in touch for sure. Yeah, happy to spread this in my end of the mycelial network, and hopefully make some more connections.
Awesome. And you're on Twitter and Instagram, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I got a Facebook account. I'm mostly active on Instagram and Twitter though. So yeah, you can find me there. Open Mind Gunlock on Instagram and Open Mind HC on Twitter.
All right, and I'll include those links in the description. Thank you to everybody that's watching. And Chris, I'll let you go for now. Take care, man.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.